Okay, for the past week I've been learning how to do bobbin lace and I'm really enjoying it, but as a disclaimer, I'm very new to all of this. Um, I'm using, instead of the wire that was called for in the book that I'm learning from, I'm going to use this braided beading thread. This one is Wildfire .006, and I use the white with certain colored beads. And you can also use fishing line, the braided fishing line. This one is green and it goes with most everything, and it's .008. You want something stiff but small enough to go through the beads several passes without breaking the beads. So, and I'm also just using this large-eyed needle because it goes through these beads pretty well. The beads I'm using are a size 6/0 and 8/0, and I'm keeping it really simple. You can get real fancy with this. A lot of the spangled bobbins that I've seen have a big bead at the bottom, but I thought it would be better for me if I used smaller beads and kept it really simple, because I've watched some videos where it was a little confusing with all the charms and things hanging off, and they were jangling around. So I'm keeping mine really simple. And so the other thing I had to do was, when I bought these bobbins, they had some varnish in the holes, and I had to use a bead reamer to poke that varnish out because it was bending my needle trying to get it through with all that varnish on there. So let's get started. I don't have a knot on the tail of my thread, and I'm going to put 6 of the larger beads and 7 of the smaller. So I'm going to start with a smaller and just alternate. And you can decorate it however you want, but I wanted to keep this in proportion to these tiny bobbins. So that's 6 of the larger ones, and I want to add 1 more smaller one. So I'm hanging on to the tail so I don't drop my beads off the other end. And I'm just going to leave enough of a tail to thread back in the opposite direction once I'm finished with the first step. So I'm just going to pass my needle through the bobbin, the hole that's in the bobbin. And I'm going to go back in on the tail end. Here's the tail end right here. I'm going in a circle. I'm going to go back through the beads. Try not to miss any beads, because then you'll have a loop on the outside of them. So I'm going to flip that over and look at the back. And you can go bead by bead if you want to. You don't have to go all at one go. So what I'm trying to do is circle around here. And this is not going to stay tight because I have no knot on the tail. So I'm not really worried about that. And the more thread passes that I make, the tighter that this is going to be. So I can pass back through all the way, which is what I'm going to do a second time, and come back out through the bobbin again. There's not going to be a lot of stress on these, so the main reason I'm going through more than one pass is I want this to quit slipping on me, and I want it to be a tight circle up against the wood there. So I'm going through, and the more passes you make, the less the thread slips. I mean, so even now without a knot, I can barely pull that through. So that's good. So I'm going to go back up. I've come out of the bobbin right here. I'm going to go back up 3 or 4 beads and tie a knot with this end. And I just lay it down to make it easier for me to see. And I pass my needle underneath the set, and I keep an eye on where that tail came out of that little silver bead right there. And I want to make sure my knot lands in between those two beads and not around some of the other beads, because then I'll have a big loop that knots up on me and I'll have to start over. So I'm going to try to slowly guide my knot between those two beads, keeping an eye on that spot and making sure my knot doesn't form too early, because I want the knot to form down between those beads. So I'm going to do a second knot in the same way. Keeping an eye right there. Sometimes that loop wants to grab another bead. And so to get rid of that big jumbled knot, I'm just going to pull through a couple of beads and make that knot disappear up inside of a bead. And you can go a couple more beads before you cut if you want to. I'm just going to burn mine off. I've done this before and I've burned some of the threads that were holding the beads together, so you want to be careful with that. So I'm going to unthread the needle and thread the tail and do the exact same thing with the tail. I'm going to just go through a few beads, tie a knot, and then hide the knot and then cut it off. So since this tail is coming out here, I'm going to go back through this way and pull it tight. See, I was able to snug it up a little more. I had too much thread showing there. I didn't like it. But since there was no knot on this tail, you can snug it up some more and tighten things up. So that's good. I like working with this braided thread because it does help you tighten things up a little. So I'm going to put a knot here, because my tail's pretty short, between this blue bead and this silver one. I hope my hands are not getting in the way. So I've got the first knot done. I'm going to do a second one. There we go. And now I can go up a few beads to pull that knot in where it'll disappear, and then I can cut my thread. And easy as that. And you don't have all those wires where you have to wrap them around and clip them with a side cutter. In the book, she showed passing the wire through in opposite directions through the hole, and then you had to secure the wire somehow, and again, I didn't really like that idea. And this is stiff enough with that braided cord. So there you have it.